it's quite a new and different room for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, every year is different. Every year I've been here, we've had different quarterbacks coming in and out, whether it's been Tommy and then, Tyrod leaving and having Drew come in. So I think that's the National Football League. You're always ready for guys to come in and out, and just, keep it the same every year as far as how you approach them and teach and go from there.
What have you learned about Jackson so far? From being, you knew about him, but now you're actually working with him, day to day.
Yeah, I think I did know this, but it's impressive to see the last couple weeks just how he's prepared and, made the transition to becoming a pro. We thought that about him, which is one of the reasons why we liked him. But he's done a really good job of coming in here and understanding what he's got to do to make himself a pro and approaching it the right way.
What does that mean, make himself a pro?
Well, there's always a transition for guys when you go from college to a different environment where, I tell every rookie this that we have when they come in. It's the first time in your life where you're really kind of on your own, There's not people there in a college atmosphere which, take more time and all of that. You're kind of transitioning to adulthood, if you will. So that part of it, understanding that it's regimented when you're here, but it's not as regimented when you're away from the building. You're still on campus in college. You're still around people that are in a routine of going to class and things like that. So there's a transition period that I think happens for rookies that, is kind of lost. Everybody talks about the football part of it, but just the life part of it, of living on your own for the first time, trying to find a place to live in a different city, all those things are part of becoming a pro, not just the football stuff.
How about physically? I mean, it's like, again, you see everything, but then when you see it on the field, what have you seen in that regards?
Just an instinctive player. Does a really good job of knowing where, to go with the ball, even if he's not fully aware of what's going on yet, just as a rookie. Has really good spatial awareness. All the things we thought we saw on tape have kind of shown up when you see it live for the first time.
We all kind of think we know Russell Wilson, right, for 13 years in the league, kind of who he is. I'm sure you did even more so in the profession. Is there anything now that you know from him or surprised you about him that you just didn't know? Assumptions, but you just said, wow, I didn't know that about Russ.
No, so I've had kind of a unique experience with that because I was with Russ for 3 years at NC State. So I knew him as a young kid. I was a young kid. We joke all the time. We kind of came up together. Our formative years in football were kind of side by side. So Russ hasn't changed. He's the same guy he was when he was 18 years old. Still has a great work ethic. Prepares every day like it's new for him. Takes notes. He's the definition of a pro. So to answer your question, I'd say no. There's nothing I really didn't know about him just because I knew him, way back then. He's mature now, like we all are. Hopefully I am now too, to him. But no, yeah, just nothing really different than I haven't seen from him before.
Russell Wilson. He doesn't have to go to baseball practice anymore.
What's that? No, he doesn't have to go to baseball practice anymore.
And the Russell Wilson from NC State always had something to prove to people. Do you think that's still the case with him, even more so now than maybe?
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about Russ is he's always done that. I think Russ will be the first to tell you, he's got high expectations for himself, and I think he's more so just trying to, prove it to himself than it is to other people. Even when he was younger, Russ did a great job of focusing on what he needed to do, his internal motivations rather than the external.
The leadership has been a big highlight by teammates. What have you seen from that? And not only the QB room, but when you're working with the rest of the offense? Yeah,
I think when you have a group like we have, none of them are afraid to speak and say anything that is on their mind. Russ, Jameis, Tommy, who's been in the system longer than any of them, and Jackson too, is getting comfortable with that. So I think when you have that group that's willing to do that, it permeates throughout the rest of the offense, and we've seen that in our meetings. Guys are really willing to have those discussions that help in OTAs that lead to. Now we don't have to have that discussion in training camp because we already did it. So I think the leadership part of it, of just being willing to get in front of the guys and say, hey, is this good? Is this what you want? No. Then we have a discussion about it. That might not necessarily be, leadership and, the definition of it, but it is because it shows guys that are willing to talk and bring up questions.
You talked about guys saying what's on their mind. In Jameis's case, I'm sure you never know what that's quite going to be, right?
There's 2 or 3 things a day where, just you got to be ready for anything. He keeps it light. Jameis does a great job of understanding when to, throw in a good one-liner and all that. He definitely keeps it fun. And he's got a lot of experience. He's, 9-10 years in the league. So not only does he bring the fun and the energy with those things, but a lot of experience in a lot of different offenses. So he makes great points too.
How is he handling this sort of sandwich role, between Russ at the start and then Jackson below him, chasing up?
Yeah, he's handled it great. I'd say that's the thing about the room, that all of those guys have handled all of their roles, if you will, really well. When one guy's up, the other 3 are back there, and they're hoping we hit a big one. Whenever the thing that I love to see is whenever we have a good play at that spot, see all 3 guys back there, their hands are raised, they're running in there to give a high five or something like that. So they've all handled it extremely well.
Russ has had some rough patches here, after leaving Seattle. In Denver, certainly, late in Seattle, certainly, up and down last year in Pittsburgh. What do you see from him as a quarterback, and do you see him kind of, anxious to show that he's not that quarterback?
Yeah, I see a guy who is still really accurate with the football. He still makes really good decisions. One of the best. This is going back to, when he was a freshman at NC State. He's one of the great deep ball throwers that there's been. None of that stuff has changed. It's all been pretty consistent over his career, I'd say. Sometimes in this game, things don't bounce your way or don't go the way you want them to, and you just got to be resilient with that. And that's the biggest thing that Russ has done. I think he'd be the first to tell you, the last couple of years might not have gone my way how I completely wanted to, but he's ready for the next challenge, and we're already right there with him.
OTAs and training camp, minicamp rather, goes by so quickly. How have you seen the relationship between this group of quarterbacks and the skill players evolve and establish chemistry? It's
been great. Like I said, those conversations they're all willing to have has really helped. Russ does a great job of making sure those guys are on the same page. Jameis, Jackson, Tommy, they're constantly talking with those guys, not just in practice, but in the meeting rooms. And I think the more and more we do that, the better off we're going to be in terms of hitting the ground running come August. And they really have taken that without, no pushing from us or anything like that. A guy like Russ, who's been in the league for 14 years, kind of knows, what he wants, how he wants things to be done. But he's willing to have a conversation too. It's not just, hey, do this and it's the end of it. He's very open with those guys. Those guys are open with him, so it's been good to see.
Might have been asked this already. Apologies. What have you seen from Jackson just as he arrived?
Yeah, instinctive. Does a really good job of just knowing where to go with the ball. When you're a rookie, you don't know what you don't know yet, and you're trying to figure everything out. And he just does a good job of, once the ball snapped, is just letting himself play football. So that's the biggest thing I've seen with him. He's not letting it get too big on him. He's just playing football and going out there and enjoying it.
I think we asked you enough about the possibility last year. What went into actually moving Evan to guard?
I just think conversation with everybody in the building, including Evan, and we'll see what happens. He's doing well so far. Excited to see when we put pads on, what happens. But he's embraced it. We've embraced it. It's been good so far.
Is he similar to anyone who's made that? Was similar to anyone you've seen who's made that transition from tackle?
I think it's throughout the NFL. Plenty of guys have moved from tackle to guard. So we'll see.
Have you been primarily working him on the left side, and if so, why they are not on the right or both sides?
He swung. He's played both. I think initially when we had done it, and his familiarity of having played left guard when he was at Alabama. So there's probably a goal for that of, okay, hey, we'll make it a switch. Let's go ahead and feel comfortable to that. But he's now played both sides and he'll continue to play both sides.
And for anyone making that transition challenge, specifically for him, like his body type, his skill set, moving inside, what's the biggest challenge for him?
Yeah, I think so much is pre-snap, training your eyes and getting used to what can indicate something's going to change, whether it's when you're playing tackle and you spend time there, a lot of times it's off the edges and it's safety rotations versus where your eyes need to be when you're playing guard and how things might change. Might be relying upon a D lineman's alignment or a linebacker's alignment. So just I think training your eyes and the reaction, your rules will change to some extent. So just getting used to what your responses are when the pitcher changes.
Carm, what about his footwork working inside? He's not going up against, to use Greg Van Roten's quote, big guys, slow guys. They're more athletic now inside. So how's Evan, adjusting with his footwork inside?
We don't change a whole lot as far as, I would say, I guess the set angles that you would employ more often than not might be a little different at guard versus tackle. But otherwise, the core fundamentals of offensive line play, at least for myself, don't differ a whole lot except for set angles, I would say. So,
how do you approach him? You're bringing back two veteran guys who, were starters last year at guard. Do you tell him you have a chance to win a starting job, or how do you approach that?
I think like anything else, you got to earn it every day, and you have to earn it every year. Nothing is assumed. So competition is a good, healthy thing that we all believe firmly in. And you just go, and it's the nature of the NFL.
First chance for us to ask you about Bo and, what you liked in the entire process, and now what you've seen so far in the spring, and what's been the approach with him?
Obviously, there was a lot to like. We drafted him. But Bo's a smart kid who cares, takes the job seriously, athletic, does a good job. He's a rookie, and there's miles to go. Just keep working with him, but I like how he approaches things so far.
Daves and Joe talked about, when you guys drafted him, the versatility that he could be a 5-spot guy eventually down the road. How important is it for you guys to have him? We've only seen him at right tackle, but is it important with a young guy to kind of give him one spot, let him focus, or do you guys think you might start moving him around at some point?
Yeah, no, versatility is important. That we preach that often about, the more you can do, the more you can do. And Bo has the athleticism and the mental capabilities to be able to go and swing and play different spots. We'll keep working them at different places as we have, but still early. Rookie, no pads yet. We'll just walk before we can run. But
do you guys
anticipate him being able to play multiple?
Have you had him at multiple spots? Because we've only seen him at right tackle.
Yeah, he plays on very well. Yeah.
Carm, I know this isn't an excuse, but last year you had a lot of injuries on the offensive line. How much did that affect JMS and his development?
You're talking about JMS's injuries in particular and how they may have affected him, or just
the guys around him not having that consistency?
I wouldn't. We expect it. So, and we train that to that such. So, his injuries in particular. Just as far as time and experience lost, perhaps, but I wouldn't see the other injuries around JMS having a negative impact on his development. He's continued to improve. He's got other things to improve on. We keep setting the bar and moving it, and he leans into that. So, like a lot of how he approaches things. And so.
We got to see James Hudson a little bit. What have you seen from him so far? Just getting used to everybody, just getting used to the system and everything.
Yeah, he's done a great job. We really like James. He's been a good addition to the room, and he's been a good addition to the line in the sense of the traits that he has and can apply. So, like anything, it's a new system to him. It's not one that he's worked in his time in Cleveland in the NFL. So just kind of getting settled into some of the calls and just how some things may change. The field's 120 by 53 and a third wide, but there's still nuances to a system. It's still O-line play, but there's some of our rules and some of the things we asked him to do, and he settled into that well. We're really excited about it.
We haven't seen Andrew yet, during any of the practices that we've seen. Any concerns about him, his readiness?
No, I wouldn't expect any, but I think those questions would probably be better geared towards Dave's or Joe in that regard, just as far as players. But he's been around, he's had good attendance, and we're happy to see him whenever he gets out there.
With Andrew, he's had the leg injuries 2 years in a row. Any concerns about lingering impact?
I truly no. I would say no, but at the same time, I mean, there's no doctor in front of Barcelo. It's just Carm, coach. So I'll leave that to my betters. I really, truly no. So you always have to prepare for the eventualities. I mean, it's football. You do really. I hate to. It sounds like coach speak, but truly, I mean, you've got to plan for your contingencies. And that would include if Drew got hurt.
Dave told us that basically Jalen's been right up under Russ, and Russ has been really high on his relationship. Have you kind of seen him just get close to Russ just to build that confidence and that chemistry with him a little bit more?
I think Russ has done a tremendous job from day one of communicating with everybody in the room. He doesn't just whisper in Jalen's ear, but he's constantly communicating with the tight ends, running backs, and the wideouts on a daily basis, whether it be out here at practice, in the heat of the moment, or when we go back in and watch the tape and evaluate what we did well or what we want to improve on, and really setting the expectation for those guys and where he wants them to be and when he wants them to be there. And there's been a lot of buy-in that way, and Jameis has done the same thing.
Is Jalen, I'm sorry if you've been asked before, you probably haven't, Jalen bigger? I mean, he gained...
Yeah, he's put on some strength, some mass.
He's a pretty skinny guy. Was it hard for him to do? I mean, was that kind of a marching
You'd have to
orders?
ask him that, yeah.
But is that something you guys really said to him, look?
Well, I think, it's a physical game, right?
Yeah.
It's a grown man's game, so the stronger you can be, then obviously those things would tend to benefit your performance. So he did a really good job of maximizing his time away before he came back to April, and then continue with our strength staff since he's been here. So
with Russ's ability, still, Shea was just talking about it, throw the deep ball.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that will affect all your guys?
Well, I think it affects the defense, right? It has an impact on the defense where they got to defend the length of the field, knowing that we have the skill level, the speed to be able to threaten them deep and get behind the defenders there and score quickly. So I think that's really going to have an impact on the defensive coordinators and the play callers that we're preparing to play, and certainly that opens up things. It opens up the running game, it opens up the quick and the underneath throws. I mean, it's all tied together, but when you have the ability to strike quickly and we have the speed out there on the perimeter to be able to do that, and Russ has proven over time that he's one of the best at doing that, so hopefully that'll be a big part of the offense.
This spring you've seen that?
Yeah, absolutely.
36-year-old
been effective. No doubt.
And as far as Wandale, when you looked at his stats last year, the receptions were way up.
Mm-hmm.
The yards were not way up. Was that?
What do you mean by that?
The yards per catch, obviously, were the lowest of his career. So how do you kind of separate that in your head and try to get him more of those yards after catch?
I think he was productive with the opportunities that we gave him. He's certainly a very reliable and dependable player, and did a really good job with run after the catch. And I think he'll continue to do that. I thought he's looked really good with those kinds of things here this spring that we've asked him to do. He got a lot of confidence in Waddell, and I think all the quarterbacks do. He's one of the smartest guys on the team, knows where he's supposed to be, when he's supposed to be there, knows the entire system, can plug him in anywhere, so he's a really valuable member of the offense.
It seems like you have three guys really in motor. I know Cam's young, he hasn't done a lot yet, but what he did in college, and Tyrone, that can kind of check all the boxes for running backs, right? They can catch it, they can pass protect, they can run between the tackles, they can run outside. Is it unique to have three guys that can kind of do a little bit of everything all in the same room together?
I would say when you get to this level, when you're talking about the NFL, I think it's not uncommon actually, because most of the guys that get to this level are able to play at this level. They have to be able to do those things. It's part of the requirement. If you can't, you usually find your way out of the NFL at some point. So, but to your point, we do have a group of guys that can do a lot of different things, and it's up to us as a staff to try to figure out what those specialties are that they can do and how they can help us. And we'll evaluate all that stuff and get there when we get there.
Is a lot of that going to be opponent-based, is that a lot of that going to be opponent-based on what's going to work against a particular opponent each week, what each guy excels at in terms of how you mix and match their usage week in, week out?
It could be opponent-based, but it could also just be a feel for what we ask them to do in our offense.
Right.
What is their skill set, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and we try to put each guy in the position to where they can be successful, because at the end of the day, it's about helping the team win.
Of course.
So that's what we're trying to do.
Liddell, this is going to sound like a silly question, but given the way offensive linemen are more athletic, given the way defensive linemen are more athletic, has it changed the approach for a running back, how they hit the hole, how they view things? Has anything changed about the job?
Not really. I wouldn't say that, because at the end of the day, it's still about being tough, and it's still about your vision. I think running backs have to have vision and be able to anticipate and see the hole. But at the end of the day, they got to be tough too. They have to be tough. You're going to get hit from everybody from all different angles. And so that really hasn't changed much. The speed of the game has changed, so you got to maybe hit the hole a little bit quicker, to your point. But it's still football.